Hello and welcome everyone to Section 4.1 Federal Regulations. This is part of our chapter on maintenance publications, forms, and records. Great to have you. And again, thanks for taking the time to learn this. This will be very important for you for your oral and practical exam, for your general exam, and especially for your time out in the field. So let's jump right into it. So we're going to be focusing this lesson mostly on the federal regulations and more importantly the CFRs. Now, you've probably heard the term FARs before and you've probably also heard the term CFR. One thing I want to get you to understand right off the bat is that FAR is an outdated term and that they now use CFR instead. FAR stood for Federal Aviation Regulations, but very often in the fields, you're still going to hear people using the term, so know that these two things are the exact same thing. You'll even find it sometimes in your textbooks. Now, Code of Federal Regulations. What happened was that essentially there's this giant thing called the Code of Federal Regulations that has rules for, well, virtually everything, even about the amount of toilets that should be in a bathroom. Like, it's insane. It's just a government document that has a whole bunch of rules on a whole bunch of different subjects. And each of these subjects are divided into these things called titles. So, like if you look at this image over here, here are all the rules about the President of the United States. Here's all the rules about agriculture, energy, and there's so many of these titles, but the one that focuses on aerospace and the stuff that we focus on in this course is Title 14. So if you ever or looking up a CFR, you're going to very often see that I'm having you look up 14 CFR. That means you're going to Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So that's the aeronautics and space. Now, once you get into 14 CFR, most of what we do in aviation maintenance is going to be focused in Chapter 1 of Title 14. So in case you're wondering, again, it's not like you need to know this for the test, but I think it helps give you some good context. And then, once you get into Chapter 1, there are a whole bunch of little parts inside of the chapter. And each of these parts address a very specific subject. For example, Part 107 addresses the use of small unmanned aerial systems or drones. And Part 1 covers definitions. All the parts that you're going to use in aviation maintenance, we're going to do a little overview of it today, and we're going to dive deep into a few of the most important ones today. So, which of the 14 CFR parts do you need to know as an AMT? Well, I have them listed right here. These are the ones that sources say you need to have a working knowledge of in the field. And what I've done is that I've broken it down into 3 different categories. The green ones are ones that we're going to cover in detail in this lesson. The blue ones are ones that you're going to have exposure to sometime in this particular course, the Aviation Maintenance 1 course, or AMT 1120 or however you call it, right? And then the yellow represents stuff that may not be covered in this course, but they're still important for you to have a working knowledge of in the field, because they could very well apply to you. So let me go over a quick overview of what each of these entail. So 14 CFR Part 1 is your definitions and abbreviations. 14 CFR Part 21 is obtaining FAA approval for products and parts. So if you have a part that you want to put into circulation, because again, you need to understand something. When they build airplanes and repair airplanes, they have everything documented down to the bolts that you're using. They have to. From an accident investigation perspective and everything, it's super crucial that they have everything documented. So to get FAA approval for a particular product or part you want to put in circulation, Part 21 comes in handy here. Part 23 talks about the technical requirements that a normal category airplane needs to meet for type certification. Type certification, and we're going to learn more about this later in this particular unit, we're going to learn about something that's called a TCDS, or Type Certificate Data Sheet, where essentially In order for an airplane design to be approved, it has to show that it meets FAA requirements, and the FAA requirements for that are highlighted in Part 23. Part 27 is very much like Part 23, but it covers more the rotorcraft or the helicopters. So if you're in the helicopters, in particular helicopter design, Part 27 is your best friend. Part 39 discusses airworthiness directives. Those are essentially directives that are put out by the FAA that you're required to follow. We're going to get more into that later as well. Part 43 is bread and butter when you were working in the maintenance field. It basically goes over recording maintenance procedures and administrative procedures. So again, super important. Part 45 is identification and registration marking. Part 65, which you're going to go into entirely in Unit 5, is the certification for mechanics and airmen. That's when you're going to learn about your mechanic privileges and limitations. Part 91 is your general operating and flight rules, and what's most notable here is that 91.417 outlines the procedures for logbook and maintenance records. Very important. You spend a lot of time in the field doing paperwork. This is how you do it. 14 CFR Part 121 talks about operating requirements for large commercial airlines. 125 is essentially just like Part 121, but there are some differences there. Again, large commercial airlines. Part 135 is the small commercial flights and air taxi. Part 137 is the operating requirements for crop dusting airplanes and other aircraft applying chemicals. Part 145 discusses repair stations. Part 147 discusses AMT schools. So essentially your school that you're working with right now likely operates under a license with Part 147. All the rules on how to get a Part 147 license for a school is there. And then CFR Part 183, that discusses representatives of the administrator. Oh, man, I need a nap after that. Tell you what, let me toss you a couple quiz questions, and let's see how well you can remember this. Now, before I toss you the quiz questions, I'm going to recommend that you scan this QR code. What's going to happen is that if you scan this QR code, it's going to bring you over here to this drs.faa.gov website, which is the Dynamic Regulatory System. And the Dynamic Regulatory System essentially covers all the rules and documents and approvals, anything paperwork-wise that you need to know right here, and it's incredible. To go over the CFR Code of Federal Regulations stuff that we're going to go over today, once you get to the Dynamic Regulatory System page, what you're going to do, it's going to take me a second to remember where this is, because again, I'm used to doing this elsewhere, but if you click here where it says Regulations, and click Title 14 CFR, and then I'm going to say by part and section, that's where this appears, and it goes over each of the parts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to toss you a few multiple choice questions. It's going to require you to look through this page and try to find which part applies to a particular subject area. Good luck.